Kelvin Davis.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker, ngā mihi o te tauhou ki a koe ki ngā mema katoa hurirau te whare. Mr. Speaker, obviously our Working for Futures policy is a good one because the National Party is railing so hard against it. What does Chris Bishop have against helping people to get ahead? Now, we know the figures that in 20 years' time, 46% of the jobs that exist now will not exist at that time. So the Labour Party is doing something about it. We're focusing on the Kiwi dream, on the Kiwi future, not just railing about what's happening today and being focused on today. He's obviously a guy who's been grown up with a hint of privilege, whereas people like the people I represent up north don't quite have the same level of privilege. We actually do have to graft, we do struggle, and there's a number of people up north, although they have the potential and everything that it takes to succeed at university, the one thing they don't have, and is a barrier to their participation in university, is the money. And that's just a fact. And I hear a member over there screeching out, talk about privilege, exactly, screeching out about it, railing against this policy, and that's because they don't really mix with the people in the Tai Tokerau on the East Coast. They mix with the people of their own sort who have grown up with a measure of privilege. And we saw how New Zealanders reacted, actually, to the Prime Minister and at Eden Park on the weekend when he, instead of turning up to Waitangi Marae to face all those angry people who haven't really had all the information put in front of them regarding the TPPA. I mean, look at it. There it is there, I think, in the grey folders on the table there. I mean, all the folk up north, and they're expected to read that and absorb what's in those folders. I'm not sure whether that's the TPP in its entirety or whether that's just one chapter. Certainly, it hasn't been touched. Nobody can actually be bothered to read through it and decipher what it really means for us out there in the provinces. But John Key, instead of turning up to Waitangi to talk to the people, to allow Māori the opportunity to throw questions and challenge him on the TPPA, instead he ran off to Auckland to the Nines. Now, he walks along the side of the field in front of the terraces, and the people in the terraces, our people, soundly, roundly booed him, to the point that he scurried upstairs to where he was comfortable in the corporate boxes and was happy taking selfies with people. He was happy to be seen there. He was all relaxed. But out in the terraces where our people live, our people watch the sports, it wasn't quite the reception that he hoped for. In fact, it just reflected a measure of the anxiety that people up north at Waitangi had regarding the TPP. But actually, where I really took offence, because I was one of the people at the meeting 2 or 3 days before Waitangi Day that voted whether or not the Prime Minister should attend Waitangi. And I was one of the people that stood up and said, no, I think the Prime Minister should be allowed onto Te Marae, and I voted for him to attend, on the basis that it's an opportunity and the one and only time that Māori will have an opportunity to challenge him on the TPPA. But instead, he said, oh no, I'm not going to turn up because they're banning me from speaking. Well, look, that didn't stop anyone else from turning up. We were all told that we went to talk politics, but we did in fact talk politics, because we know, those of us who are actually in touch with the history of the area know that on the 5th of February, the day before the signing at Waitangi, all the chiefs sat at a place called Taurangatira at Waitangi, and they discussed the treaty, which was, in their day, was the equivalent of discussing politics. So if you know history, and if you know tikanga, if you're in touch with all New Zealanders, including Māori, you'd know that actually no one's going to stop you from standing up on a marae and saying what you want to say. But instead he said, oh, it's a bit Mickey Mouse. Now let me tell you, when he says it was a bit Mickey Mouse, the Te trustee maraes, he's talking about half a dozen 70 and 80-year-old pensioners. He's the man with all the resources of the state at his disposal. He has goodness knows how many ministers, how many MPs, how many spin doctors, how many advisors. He's got Cosby Textor. He's got the resources of the state at his disposal. And the best he can do is turn and pick on half a dozen elderly pensioners who are just trying to do the best for their marae. And that, to me, was insulting. It, to me, also signified how out of touch the Prime Minister is with the people of Taitokoro and Māoridom in general. How dare he stand up there and belittle and denigrate elderly New Zealanders just trying to have a role. I bet you he doesn't even understand what they do in their role on the marae. But they, over the course of 3 or 4 days, had to sit there probably 10, 12 hours at a time and welcome group after group after group after group onto the marae. He doesn't understand that because he is out of touch. What I have suggested to Shane Reti, member for Whangarei, National MP for Whangarei, is that next year, that the government, because the treaty is actually the partnership between Māori and Pākehā, and it should be the government and Māori actually sitting on the taumata of the marae and welcoming the rest of New Zealand in. That's what they should be doing as a government. And I hope they take up that suggestion. So working for futures, the dream for New Zealand, the Kiwi dream has been roundly criticised by the people on the other side of the house here. And that's to be expected. They were quite stunned by the audacity of the plan. The fact that it's forward-thinking, the fact that it's going to help New Zealanders, it's going to get people ahead. And instead, what they want to do is saddle our young people with debt into the future. Because my daughter is one of those people who is in her 4th year this year of a law degree. She knows that she has to pay off all that debt, $20,000, before she actually gets to start saving money for her house and getting on the property ladder. Property ladder. That's the Kiwi dream, owning your own house. But that's out of touch for so many of our young people. A nephew of mine was lucky enough, his parents are quite well-to-do. They helped him get into a house in a fairly average suburb in Auckland for $400,000 that house cost. 4 years later, he sold it for $790,000. That's the cost of the skyrocketing houses. That's the price it's our young people are having to pay for those houses, and yet they've got to pay off their student debt first. Mr. Speaker, we really don't ask for much in this country. We really just want, after the essentials such as oxygen and food and water, a job, a decent job. Let me tell you, I was appalled to read the other day. David Clark had done some fantastic work to get the Mondayisation of Waitangi Day. And then we hear about an employer who has insisted that their employees, if they are called up, must turn up to work on a public holiday, a statutory holiday. And if they do not turn up on that day, then they face the sack. What sort of country do we live in where an employer can just can break the law and demand that people turn up to work on a holiday and give them the sack if they don't do that? That's absurd. And all New Zealanders want is just fairness. Fairness. That is part of the Kiwi dream. Look, Serco last year, I have to say that the previous Minister of Corrections did not cover himself in glory last year. Already we see the makings of another ministerial train wreck in the Minister for Customs, who just really is not on top of the game. Nikki Wagner is probably the first nominee for the Sam Lotuenga Ministerial Competence Award. All she talks about in terms of combating the importation of pee and drugs and that is talk about the smart gate. I suggest she buys her own smart gate, installs it in her office and walks through it about a dozen times a day and hope that anything rubs off. Mr. Speaker, all New Zealanders want is a fair go. We don't want to live in poverty. We don't want our children to struggle through life. I believe Gareth Hughes summed up what is going wrong in this nation superbly, and I congratulate him
to interrupt
on
the
the
honourable
eloquence
member.
of his speech.